In 1975, a 24-year-old engineer at Kodak built something that had never existed before. A camera with no film. It weighed 8 pounds. It took 23 seconds to capture a single black and white image, and it saved that image onto a cassette tape. It was slow, it was clumsy, and it was the entire future of photography, invented a full decade before anyone else got there. His name was Steven Sasson, and when he carried it into a room of Kodak executives to show them what he had made, they were not amazed. Their reaction, in his own words, was, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." They were staring at the exact machine that would one day erase their $30 billion empire, and they asked him to keep it quiet. This is the story of how the most dominant company in the history of photography watched the future walk in through its own front door, built by its own engineer, and decided it was safer to close the blinds. To feel how staggering that decision was, you first have to understand what Kodak used to be. It began with one man, George Eastman. In the 1880s, taking a photograph was a chemical ritual, slow, expensive, and reserved for specialists. Eastman had one radical idea: make it so simple that a child could do it. His slogan said all of it in 6 words: "You press the button, we do the rest." He did not just sell a camera. He handed the entire human race the power to freeze a moment and keep it forever. And humanity never gave it back. For the next 100 years, Kodak did not compete in photography. Kodak was photography. By 1976, the company controlled 90% of all the films sold in the United States and 85% of all the cameras. Not the leading share, nearly the whole thing. The film that recorded the 20th century ran through Kodak's factories. The birthdays, the weddings, the wars, even the photographs taken on the surface of the moon. The brand sank so deep into ordinary life that it created its own phrase. A Kodak moment. It meant anything worth remembering. Think about the ritual of it. You captured a year of your life on a single roll. You dropped it off, and you waited days to find out what you had. Kodak was not selling a product anymore. It was selling memory itself. At its height, it employed 145,000 people. In 1996 alone, it brought in $16 billion. Its stock cleared $90 a share, and the company was worth more than $31 billion. For a century, it was one of the most trusted names on the planet. The man who started it never saw what came next. In 1932, George Eastman, 77 years old and in constant pain from a failing spine, sat down and wrote a note, then ended his own life. The note was 7 words long. "My work is done. Why wait?" His work was done. The empire he left behind would spend the next 80 years learning that it had no idea what to do next. So when that filmless camera appeared in 1975, Kodak faced the question that would define the rest of its life. What do you do when your own laboratory invents the thing that destroys your most profitable product? The popular version of this story says Kodak was blind, that it simply missed digital. That is not true, and the truth is far more damning. Kodak was not blind. Kodak saw digital coming with perfect clarity. It held the patents. It poured money into the research. For a stretch in the mid-2000s, Kodak actually led the entire United States in digital camera sales. And its own researchers had already done the math years earlier, in a study that concluded digital would eventually replace film, and that Kodak had roughly 10 years to get ready. They had the warning. They had the timeline. They had the technology. The problem was never that Kodak could not build the future. The problem was arithmetic. Here is the engine that made Kodak rich, and it is also the thing that killed it. Kodak barely made money on the camera. The camera was almost a giveaway. The money, the real money, was in the film. Every roll, every print, every single time you wanted to see your own memories, you paid Kodak again. Film margins were enormous. A digital camera earned almost nothing by comparison, and worse, it never needed film again. Every digital camera Kodak sold was a customer it would never build twice. To win the future, Kodak would have had to take its own golden goose and kill it on purpose with its own hands. So it hesitated. It defended the film business quarter after quarter because film was paying for everything. And while Kodak hesitated, companies with nothing to protect, Sony, Canon, and eventually every phone maker on Earth, ran straight into the market Kodak had invented, and they took it. Then the smartphone swallowed the digital camera whole, and the ground disappeared under everyone at once. By then it no longer mattered. The numbers finished the story with no mercy. Between 2003 and 2011, Kodak cut 47,000 jobs. It closed 13 factories and 130 photo labs. The little yellow boxes vanished from the shelves. And on January 19, 2012, Eastman Kodak, the company that taught the world to remember, filed for bankruptcy. $5 billion in assets, nearly $7 billion in debt. 130 years of dominance gone. Not because the company was stupid, but because it was successful, and success is the single hardest thing on earth to walk away from. Kodak still exists today, but barely as itself. Stripped down and sold off, it now makes around $1 billion a year, much of it from a strange second life. Chemicals, pharmaceutical ingredients. The company that once printed the world's memories now mostly sells the byproducts of the chemistry it mastered a century ago. And here is the lesson buried in all of it, the one that outlives Kodak. A company cannot refuse to cannibalize its own best product, because refusing does not save it. It only decides who does the cannibalizing. If you will not eat your own business, the market will always find someone happy to eat it for you. George Eastman wrote that his work was done. For the empire he built, the tragedy was the exact opposite. Its work was not done. The future was sitting right there in 1975, 8 pounds and 23 seconds at a time. Kodak just could not bring itself to pick it up. If you grew up with those yellow boxes, or you still have a shoebox of Kodak prints somewhere, tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories of giants that fell, this is Crater. I will see you at the next collapse.